Good morning. It's Pop again, Dennis Murray. Today is Popcast 65, and it's called Nature's Wisdom, Part 15. It's interesting side point. It's been a number of bright sunny days here in Maryland, and I've learned that if I allow this window shade to be up, there's too much light on one side of the face and the other side is dark. It's funny, old people have to learn lots of small things in order to use this new technology. Um, but, you learn what you have to learn if you want to do stuff. Um, okay, so uh, the results of what we've been talking about in the last few days are that we owe a debt of thanks to science, that Darwin and all the scientists that have worked on his ideas and modified them since have clarified for us how we actually are in the process of trying to explain how we could have gotten this way. They had a write-up, their description of how we are. And as a result, they've highlighted that we are a gift to each other, that we thrive when we see our common, our arrangements, our social arrangements, all the things about how we live together, see them as a problem to be solved and faced not solved, a problem to be faced together, rather than as a problem of your different ideas or your different ideas. Of course, we have different ideas. That's as normal as breathing. Our so we have a debt to science because it's helped clarify something about ourselves that wasn't that clear, that we are very much a gift to each other and that we thrive when we act that way and remember that. And so let's go back and look at a number of examples in this new light because um, each of us does interpret how best to be a gift to each other very differently. We all have the same intuition as part of our inherited or genetic psychology. I like to use the word inherited rather than genetic because genes aren't the only thing that contributes to the evolution of our psychology. And parts of our psychology are personal, so they're not all the same. But we all do seem to have this part of the psychology that gives us this intuition that leads us to gratitude for the gift of life and to each other for comfort and support in facing the gift of life. But from there on, it's everybody interprets how best to live that through the lens of his own individual psychology, his experiences, his birth situation, his thoughts and feelings, his psychological type, his work situation, family situation. We're all unique individuals, so we're going to have a wide variety of different ideas as how to best make social arrangements that allow us to be a gift to each other. And then, of course, the role of custom and tradition and cultural and religious aspects of those two things. So not only are there differences, and that's normal and healthy, it's part of nature's wisdom that since all kinds of things are possible, it's better to have a variety of approaches, and that way one of them is bound to be, successful enough to ensure the survival of the species. So if you can appreciate our differences as natural and normal and actually useful in nature's wisdom, then it's just a question of, okay, well, we still have the fact that we think the other guy is, pick a nasty word of your choosing to insert here. Um, and that's not easily made to go away. So we can decide that, well, okay, we need to work on these problems together, but we're all reluctantly thinking much of the time that, boy, that guy really is hard to get along with, and his ideas are wrong. So that's part of why it's so difficult. If it were easy, we wouldn't be spending all this much time talking about it. And there would be no use for a person like me. My, you know, my whole life has been spent looking at something very, very fundamental about our relationship to each other. But if it were easy, there wouldn't be any point in spending a lot of time thinking about it. It would work just fine. And I would be superfluous. So, give me some problems. It's like a lawyer when I used to practice law. It's nice that people constantly have problems. Otherwise, we wouldn't need any lawyers either. So, no lawyers and not many philosophers. I'm not sure that'd be a fun world to live in. It might be fun for a while, but it's sort of like saccharine sweet, or the Stepford Wives. How long do you suppose it was fun to have a robot-like wife who was subservient instead of a real person that you could, you know, um, count on to counterbalance you and to be your other side of your heart and soul. I don't think there's any substitute for the experience of being in a relationship with a real person. Um, and the more person there is on the other side of your intimate relation, the better. So anyway, we need philosophers and lawyers, and that doesn't look like it's going to go away anytime soon. I don't know why it makes me think of the Beatles song about Imagine, which I really don't agree with. I know it's a song, so as a song, it's poetry, and the music is lovely. But the actual words of the song, if you look at them, say essentially, if we didn't have countries or religions, we'd all live together as one. Well, first off, I got to tell you, it doesn't seem to be nature's wisdom that we all live together as one. It seems to be nature's wisdom that opposition is normal and is part of the deal. Surviving species are those whose members' skill sets are brought to the fore by needing to use those skills, and that opposition, uh, both in all aspects, the search for necessities to provide support for yourself and your loved ones, um, the search for your place in the community, for your place in the family. These things don't just fall off a log. Your search even for your authentic self. So you're in constant an attempt to gain a better understanding of yourself as time goes by and gives you more insight. And you keep looking inside and looking outside, looking around you. This takes effort and it takes time, it takes experience. It's nature's wisdom that our psychology develops in response to events, and that's not all smooth, sweet events. Some of them more oppositional. I flunked a course in law school because I didn't go to most of the classes because I couldn't stand the professor. He was a real idiot. He was a jerk, and I'm not supposed to use words like those anymore. So I'll just tell you that's very hard to find other words to describe him. He had an extremely insufficient amount of insight into the matters he was talking about. And I knew a lot more than he did, and there was no point to me going to the classes. I knew this guy through the courthouse where he was a practicing lawyer while I was going to law school at night and working in the courthouse in the daytime. And he was also pompous. He tried to hide his insecurities. And I think he knew he was undergifted to be practicing law. And he tried to hide his securities by being pompous, by turning small things into big deals and, you know, creating a picture of himself, as a good lawyer when he in fact was at best and also ran. And so I just didn't like him. He didn't like me either. And it was painfully plain. And so, of course, he took a good deal of pleasure in flunking me for not attending the requisite number of classes. And I had to take a makeup course that summer, which it didn't cause me not to finish, it didn't delay my graduation. That was a spring semester course. I just took an extra summer semester course and graduated in the fall, same as planned. And by happy chance, the course I took was pretty useful. The makeup course was pretty useful. Um, but, so there's nature's wisdom is not consistent with the song Imagine by the Beatles. And it's a it's a problem when people have visions of how life could be at its best that are completely inconsistent with the nature's wisdom. Um, of course, in the song, they've dismissed any religious wisdom because they think religion and countries are the problem. Um, okay, a secret dislike. I never could stand John Lennon. I'm sorry. I know that's socially, backward. But I thought he was full of himself, and he went on and on and on about using drugs. And I just had no use for that. I'll concede the music is fabulous. Their musical genius involved is incredible. I just didn't pay any attention to the man as a person, and I never joined in with the hero worship of John Lennon. And enough said. So you see differences. I'm a nice person. A lot of people think he was a nice person too. Um, we have very, very big disagreements about what nature's wisdom is and how to live the gift of each other. Um, and that's why it's so hard. But that does appear to be what nature intends. That running into opposition helps you discover capacities you didn't know you had, that you wouldn't have discovered if you didn't have opposition. So, let's not be startled when we discover that even though we see each other as a gift to each other, there's still an awful lot of I can't stand that SOB going on. And we just have to manage it as best we can. And the key there is restraint. Um, so literally, you can't make yourself not dislike somebody. You can try to appreciate his point of view. And that if you're able to see some wisdom in his point of view, some perspective that makes his point of view, creditable, then that might help. But you might still even seeing some wisdom and merit to the guy just find him so irritating. Maybe he's just irritating in spite of being right because he's full of himself. So I mean, that's his problem. If you're full of yourself, that's really your problem. And it's not my problem if you're full of yourself. So there's no reason for me to get all, upset because you have a problem about being full of yourself. But there's some kinds of things that push other people's buttons. Everybody has a different set of buttons. But in the course of, the rubbing shoulders together to pass through the crowd, that's a normal part of life. Some of your buttons are going to get pushed. And when they do, the best you can do is exercise restraint. You can't make your strong negative reaction go away. You can just accept it and try not to be ashamed of it, and try to not wallow in it either. Um, and So, like the other day, I saw on Facebook that some people thought it would be fun to play a dirty trick on some other people. So somebody apparently put on TikTok a bunch of statements that made uh, groups of people from the Trump world feel like they needed to go to Gettysburg to stop an outrage from occurring. And it was a prank. There may have been outrages occurring else in the world at that time, but not at that place. It was just a prank. Um, so, question, is that really exercising restraint? I mean, is pulling dirty tricks on people that you really don't like exercising restraint? Or is it wallowing in your dislike of them? And I'm not going to try and answer the question. Happily for me, all I have to do is ask the question. I think that we all have to consider it as an aspect of our own decision making about how we want to go forward. But if, as we were saying the other day, emotions are such a big part of it and they're so normal and natural, and opposition, dislike, and differences are so normal and natural, and we really can't do much about our deepest emotions, hatred, fear. Hatred springs from fear. But just like hope springs eternal in the human breast, hate and fear is pretty much eternal as well. There's always something to be afraid of, and most of the time, even when you're not distracted by particularly happy moments, you're aware of things that you're afraid of, and fear, as we've said, can easily turn to hatred. So that's normal, and there's nothing you can do about having fear and risking that it turns to hate. But the only thing you can do is attempt to restrain, use your conscious choice to the extent that you have conscious choice to restrain your response to these events. Don't wallow in them. And I kind of feels to me like playing that kind of dirty trick that was reported, uh, you know, in on Facebook the other day of getting people to go to Gettysburg to stop what they thought would be an outrage. That doesn't feel like restraint. Um, and as much as I enjoy seeing opposition figures slammed, I'm not sure that hate ads or negative ads in politics are restraint. And it's one thing to say, I think that this candidate is far better than that candidate in terms of a series of skills that turn out to be, in my opinion, quite useful in running the country. Um, it's another thing to say a whole series of very, very negative things about one of the candidates. And but I think it's normal, it's natural, and it's where we are right now in politics. We're wallowing in it, but we don't like the feeling of being dirty and needing an emotional shower to wash some of this hatred off that we're getting out of how we're acting right now. So one of the things I want to, put on the table for conversation for each person to ask himself, herself, um, is, you know, what does restraint have a role? And if so, how do you actually exercise restraint? If the other fellow is, in your judgment, so evil that nothing less than saying that about him is acceptable to you. Um, you have to think this through. What are the longer term consequences? What's the situation we're in, and how is that going to play in that situation? Um, there's an awful lot of things we don't really know here. How do you get other people to change their mind about things that are deeply rooted in them? Very little is known about how to do that. There are people that know how to manipulate your worst thoughts and feelings. Um, there have been people that are pretty good at that for a long time. Um, but how do you get people to take a more positive approach than the one that seems to be rooted deeply in them at the moment? Uh, I think that's a subject of a long, long, long time of study in the future. But I'm pretty sure that poisoning the well hasn't worked out to be an effective strategy in the past. And, it's equivalent that we see all the time. In effect, he started it. Well, I only called him those kind of names because, what he did to me first. Um, I, I'm not saying that there's some easy way to write in your own heart, in your own behavior, uh, some little simple set of rules that can be applied in every case about how to deal with people that you think are intensely unsuited to the role they're playing in your life, um, and to the role they're playing in public life. I don't claim to have the answers, but I do think we need to start asking ourselves some questions, about our emotions, about our discussions uh, with others as to how we can be effective in helping change minds that are rooted deeply, and the wisdom of things like poisoning the well and pointing to the other and saying, well, he did it first. Um, these are very, very old problems, and we're not very skilled at dealing with them, and that's the task we face. So we can see ourselves as a gift to each other all day long, but when we actually get to trying to work out our social arrangement problems, it's tough. But we all knew that. So um, uh, I wish I had more insight other than drawing our attention to some things that are going on. I have some other stories, but they'll keep till tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.